How to create a game for Android devices, Part 6. Import C++ game source code. So, in order to continue this video tutorial, you need to import the C++ source code for the game. To do that, you can open the Google Play Store and search for the app Learn Android Games. Then you're going to download the full version of the app. Then just go ahead and open any lesson of the app and click on the source code download button. That is going to download a zip file with all the images, assets, music, and the source code for the game. So send that file to your PC from your Android device, and then inside your PC, go ahead and import the source code into Eclipse. And you can find the links in the description below. If you don't have access to the Google Play Store, you can send me an email requesting me the source code, and I'll get to you as soon as I can, sending you all the source code for this game. So once you download the app Learn Android Games from the Google Play Store, you can go ahead and click on Start and then browse through the app. It contains 10 lessons to create your game and a previous lesson to download the final game of this tutorial. So to download the source code, just click on any lesson, and inside you will find the source code button. So go ahead and click that button and open it using the browser of your preferences. I'm gonna use Chrome. And this is going to open a Dropbox link that contains the file with all the source code and all the assets you need to build your game. Inside you're going to find images, music, and the source code. So go ahead and download that zip file and then into your Android device, and then you can send it by email or however you want to your PC, so you can import it into Eclipse. So you need to download this app and download the source code to continue with this tutorial. You can also download the final game of this tutorial. So I'm gonna click on before starting, and that is going to open the Google Play Store with the final game Aargh Flies that I developed and uploaded to the Google Play Store. So you can download that game and play it just to have an idea of how your final game will look. Once you download the pro version of the app and you get the source code, you are going to get all of these files. I'm providing all the source code for the game, so you don't have to worry about all the game logic. You can then modify this source code and adapt it to your needs. If you don't have an Android device to download the app, you can still email me and ask me for the source code. My email is dubon07@gmail.com. Just send me an email, tell me you need the source code, and I'll send it to you. So once you get all the files for the source code, just go ahead and select them all, and in Eclipse, open the classes folder. Inside, you'll see that you only have 4 source files now. But we will add all of these source code files to the classes. So just drag and drop this to the classes and select copy files. Okay. And if ask you if you wish to overwrite, yes, click yes to all. Now you have all the source code for the game. Now we need to modify some things. For example, the images for the game, the title, the background, the animation, and the music. So on the next video tutorials, I'll show you how to do that. For now, just make sure you have all the source code for your project. Remember, you can download my app and get the source code, or send me an email to dubon07@gmail.com, and I'll email. So before we look at the source code that you just downloaded, there are some important facts that you should know. First of all, this is not a C++ course. You are not expected to dominate the language, but you are expected to have programming skills if you want to modify the game. If not, you just can leave it as it is and only work on the animations and the graphics. And you need to understand what is a director, a scene, a layer, and a sprite in Cocos2d-x if you want to modify the source code. So, I'll explain to you what is a director, scenes, layers, and sprites. So, you can think of this like a movie. The director runs everything. It knows which scene is currently active and allows you to change scenes by replacing the current scene or pushing a new one into the scene stack. Look for the CC director in Cocos2d-x documentation for more information. You can take a look at the link for the Cocos2d-x documentation in the description below. Scenes. The scene is what is running and users see what is happening in real time. A scene is a container that holds sprites, labels, nodes, and other objects. Look for the CC scene in Cocos2d-x documentation for more information. Then we have the layers. A scene may contain many layers. Think of layers as the Photoshop layers if you have worked with Photoshop. You can place one layer in front or back of another layer. Layers can contain objects like sprites, and for more information look for CC layer in the Cocos2d-x documentation. And finally we have the sprites. Sprites are a core element to any game. Sprites can be the images or the graphics to your game. Animations are based on sprites and sprite sheets. And for more information, look for the CC sprite in the Cocos2d-x documentation. So, let's take a look at our game layout and how we are going to organize our game. This is how the source code is organized. So, in the source code we have a CC director, which is running a single scene. The scene has 4 layers: the game over layer, the pause layer, the HUD layer, and the actual game layer where you are playing. Now, the game over layer has a CC sprite that it is a pop-up. This pop-up is an image. Next, we have the pause CC layer, and the pause CC layer has 2 sprites. That will be the pause button and the pop-up image. These sprites are all images. Then we have the HUD layer, which contains 2 sprites: the score label that we're going to use to display the high score, and the lives that we're going to display at the top right of the screen, displaying the lives you have left in the game. And finally we have the game layer, and the game layer will contain the enemy or the animations, the sprite animations, and it's going to contain the background also. So once we understand how our game is going to be laid out, we can go ahead and look at the source code and modify certain values in our game. So let's go back to Eclipse and look at the source code. So back in Eclipse, let's take a look at the source code or the classes that we imported into our project. So let's start by the app delegate. So let's double click, and then let's double click again to examine the source code. So the most important thing about the app delegate is in the application did finish launching method. Here we initialize the director that is going to control the scenes. Then the director can also set the animation interval or the frames per second. You can change this value. Inside the app delegate we also create a scene, the main menu scene. and we tell the director to run that scene. So in the app delegate, we initialize a director and then we run the main scene. Let's take a look at the main menu. Let's go back and let's double click the main menu.cpp file. And we double click again to make it big. So in the main menu, one of the most important things to notice is that we include the simple audio engine.h file so that we can play our music and our sound effects. So in the main menu, in the init method, we have to preload the background music and preload the sound effects that we're going to use in our game. We also load the images and the sprite sheets and the animations that we're going to use in the game. So we create an enemy animation playlist file. I'm gonna show you later on how to create this file, and basically this is the animation for the enemies. We also include the background that we're going to use, the images that we're going to place in the background. We also do that in the main menu. That is very important to notice because these are the places that you want to come back later to change certain aspects of your game. We also establish the score and the score label, and we start the game, or we have the play game method which starts the game and we can play. So let's take a look at the game.cpp source code. Inside this file, as you can see, we create different layers for our game. We create the actual game layer, which is the one that is going to run the animations, the HUD layer, the pause layer, and the game over layer. We need all these layers in our game scene, and we're going to call each layer depending on the actions that happen in the game. So one important method to note here is the initialize game. Here we have two loops where we initialize the enemies on the screen. So we create a grid where we place the enemies on the screen in these two loops. So go ahead and examine that code if you want to change that. And we also handle what happens when the user touches the screen. So here in this cc_touches_begin method, we handle what happens when, for example, an enemy was tapped in the screen. In this case, a fly. When a fly is tapped in the screen, we handle that event here. So we also have more methods like the show enemy to show the enemies, the get enemies, and let's focus on the enemy was tapped method. So let's go to the enemy source code cpp.cpp, and here we have a method to start the animation for the enemy. So this starts the animation for the fly. If you download the game, you can see that the fly appears, that comes from back from the screen into the front and then disappears again. So that animation is handled in this method. This is where it starts, and you start by telling the get animation with frames method which frames to recover from the sprite sheet to start the animation. We have the start loop animation, that this is a continuous loop that is going to be playing for as long as your game is running. And we also use the get animation with frames method, and we specify which frames we want to show in that animation. We have the stop enemy stop method that stops the enemy in the screen, and that plays an animation of what happens when the enemy is stopped. We have the enemy reset that calls the HUD layer, and what happens when an enemy is missed. That means that we couldn't tap a fly in the screen, for example, and the fly gets away. So the HUD layer is called with the missed enemy method. And when an enemy is tapped, this is the method that is called the was tapped method. So as you can see, first we stop all the actions on the screen, and then we play this animation, and we specify to play from frame 41 to 65. As I told you before, I'll explain to you how to create these animations, and I'll tell you where these numbers come from later on a later video. So let's take a look at the HUD layer from here. So what happens when an enemy is missed? So we have a system of lives in our game. So if we missed an enemy, our lives are decreased. So that code is over here, and we run out of lives, it is a game over for us. So let's take a look at the game over now. And the game over, what it does, it just displays a pop-up window with two options. An option if you want to play the game again, or if you want to go back to the main menu. So the game over basically is just a pop-up window that is displayed on the screen, and where you can choose to replay the game or just to end the game. And let's take a look at the pop-up source code or .cpp file. And as you can see, this pop-up is just a creation of a sprite with a name. So this is an image that we pass to this method, and that is the image that we want to display as the background of our pop-up window. And we create a label also with a font that we specify. We also have a pop-up with title to create the title, and so on. You are free to explore this code if you want to modify this game. If not, you only need to create the graphics and the animations, and then you just need to open one single file. You need to open the constants file. So let's take a look at that file now. I'm going to double click to make this full screen. So the constants file is a file I created for you so you can modify your game without having to look at all the source code and navigating through all the code if you are not familiar with C++. So basically in this file we are going to define the images that we are going to use in our game, the button images, the text, the background music, the sound effects in our game, the sprite sheets that we're going to use, and we're going to define some of the game rules. And then we have some other constants as the font that we are going to use in our game. So open this file, and as you can see, it comes with some instructions. So for example, in the define main level background constant, we include a file name. So this file name is the background picture for the gameplay layer. So whichever background picture you decide to use in your gameplay layer, you just go ahead and replace this name with the name of your background image. For example, if your image was named background 1, then you just type in the name background 1 and the extension, if it is PNG or JPG or GIF. I recommend to use PNG file extension. So go ahead and replace that for the image file that you're going to use for your background. You have also a background HD. So this is the background picture for the game player for HD devices. So you can create two versions of your picture, one for low resolution devices and one for high resolution devices. Or you can use the same for both. You have also the life. So this is the image of the life that you're going to use in our game, and you need to include this image in the sprite sheet you create for the animation. I'm going to show you later on how to create the sprite sheet, but just remember that you need to include the life inside the same sprite sheet. This is the init enemy sprite is the first animation frame. So when you create a sprite sheet, you usually name your files A and then the number of the frame for your animation. So for example, your sprite sheet can contain from A1 to A50. That means it contains 50 images for your animation. So on this string or text, you're going to replace it with the first name of your animation, and the animation file name must always start with an A. So most of the time you won't change this because usually your animation are going to start from number 1, and don't change this letter A from your file because the code is working with the letter A. So the same goes for the other images, the background, the menu background, and the menu background HD. Just go ahead and specify the name for your files. The button images that you want to use in your pop-up screens or in the main menu. So go ahead and include those images of your buttons here. And here we have some text that we can replace. So for example, in the game over pop-up, we have two options. One option to replay the game or one option to go back to the main menu. So you can specify here the name of the action that you want to do. The same goes for the pause pop-up window. We have a resume and a main. And for the top score, we have the text that we want to display as top score. So basically this is not going to change unless you want to display another text for the top score. And the start text just define the text that is going to be displayed in the button that starts the game. In the background music, we just include the name of the MP3 file for the background music, and on the sound effects, we include the sound effects for when an enemy is hit and when a life is decreased from your game. And we include those files as a .wav or .wag files. We include the sprite sheets, so we just place the name of our sprite sheets here. If we create another sprite sheet for HD devices, and you can use the same name if you only create one. And some of the game rules that you can read here, the instructions. So this is the enemy time on screen, it's the time the enemy is shown on the screen. 1 is very fast and 5 is very slow, and so on. So go ahead and read this file and understand the game rules. And we have other constants that we also define. For example, the font of the game, we use a Toonish font. This is very important. You need to include this file in your resources. This file comes with the source code. So when you download the source code, you are also going to find the Toonish font file. So if you use the Toonish font, make sure to include that file here. If not, if you want to use your own font, go ahead and download your own font from the internet, but remember always to include it in the resource folder. And that's it for your constants file. So as you can see, this makes it a lot easier to modify your game without having to look at the actual. There are a few more things we need to do before we try to run our game. One of them is to modify the Android.mka file. You can find that file under the folder JNI and Android.mk. So open that file, double click, and in the local source files, we need to include all the classes that we just imported into our project. So at this time, we only have the app delegate and the hello world scene classes. So we need to go ahead and include all of the other .cpp files we have. So just go ahead and copy this line, paste it, and write the name of your file. For example, enemy.cpp, and do the rest for all of the classes you have. When you're done adding all of the classes, you should see something like this. So in the resource folder, or in the exercise that I include in my app that you can download, I'm going to include the Android.mk file for you to compare to yours. But remember, this file depends on the machine I am using. So the Android.mk file that is included in the download exercise in the app, it's for my computer. So make sure you only modify these local source files in your Android.mk file.